Thanks, Natalie and Maya. Today I'm joined by Jack Beermann, a Boston University law professor and professional acquaintance of Justice Brett Kavanaughs. Kavanaugh, who was sworn in as the newest U.S. Supreme Court justice on Saturday, faced immense backlash after 3 women accused him of sexual assault. Professor Beermann, a specialist in civil rights litigation and administrative law, is here to explain Kavanaugh's confirmation process and give us his personal insight into America's newest Supreme Court justice. Professor Beermann, thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
So to start things off, what is the process to confirm someone to the Supreme Court?
Well, the president nominates them, and then they have to have a majority vote in the Senate. Before they get to the floor of the Senate, they go through the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is what you saw. The hearings are conducted by a committee, which then makes a recommendation to the full Senate.
And do you think any changes should be made to the confirmation process to reduce the influence of partisan politics in the judicial system?
Well, I'm not sure you could really ever do that if it's going to be a political process for appointing them. But one change I would make, which wouldn't have applied to Justice Kavanaugh, would be to put a time limit on the Senate's action, so that if, for example, if the president nominates someone, if the Senate takes no action within 6 months, to say that that person is automatically confirmed. And that would have changed things. Obviously, Merrick Garland would have been on the Supreme Court since they delayed his nomination was pending for a year before it elapsed after the Congress changed.
And what, if any, would be some immediate disqualifications for the justice position?
You know, the most common thing that results in a justice not sitting or a judge not sitting is some sort of financial irregularity that wasn't disclosed at the time that they were nominated. And we had one nominee to the Supreme Court who had smoked marijuana with his law students while he was a law professor, and that he couldn't get confirmed after that came out.
That's really interesting. And why don't sexual assault allegations constitute disqualification?
Well, allegations never disqualify anyone. They have to be proven. I mean, allegations obviously are serious, you know, and the senators all claim they took the allegations seriously and they investigated them. Had there been substantiation, I don't think that Justice Kavanaugh would have been confirmed. The problem is it was sort of a he said, she said, her word against his, their word against his word, and without any corroborating evidence, I think they just the Republican Party decided that they weren't going to disqualify him for that. Had there been corroboration or some more substantiation, it might have resulted in him not getting confirmed.
And what authorization does the FBI need to conduct a complete investigation into sexual assault charges?
Well, normally an FBI agent can't conduct an investigation without supervisory authorization. And in a case like this, where it's so high profile, the head of the FBI would direct the investigation and delineate its scope. And the president, as the ultimate executive in the government, could overrule them and either narrow or broaden the scope of any investigation. So really, it's up to the leadership of the FBI to decide what the scope of an investigation is.
And do you think the investigation into the sexual assault allegations against Kavanaugh was thorough enough, or do you think they should have further postponed his confirmation until a more thorough investigation could be conducted?
Well, there's some people that say that they should have asked more of the people that the victims named as having knowledge of it. I don't really know the details of the entire investigation. It doesn't seem to me like a further delay would have been necessary. In fact, I think it's really, the whole thing should have been made public earlier. I think the Democratic leadership made a serious mistake when they leaked something that they were not authorized to leak. And if they were going to leak it, they should have leaked it early on so that it could have been part of the regular confirmation process, instead of having the whole thing turn into the circus with this special extra hearing that we saw last week.
And do you think Dianne Feinstein and the Democrats leaked the letter from Blasey Ford?
Well, it sounds like it. There's no other explanation for how it became public. I mean, no one really knows for sure, except the person who did it, how it got out. But the way it got out, I think, was really unfortunate. That, you know, when they got the letter, you know, weeks earlier, if they were going to leak it, they should have leaked it right away. And I think that it made it look like a terrible partisan attack to wait so long to leak it. I think had it come out earlier as part of the normal process of investigation and confirmation, it would have been a much better process. So, I mean, I don't know who leaked it, but it seems like she was the one who had it. And suddenly reporters began appearing at Dr. Ford's home. And she had, you know, so someone had told them that something was up.
Yes. And it's my understanding that you have known Brett Kavanaugh for many years, having worked in the same area of administrative law and have spoken together at several conferences. How would you describe Kavanaugh's behavior around you in social or professional settings?
Oh, he's a super nice person. He's always been very nice, very cordial. I would say that he and I are probably on the opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, but he's always been very friendly to me. He always is interested in what I have to say about things, and we've had good conversations about legal issues, personal stuff. He's talked to me about, he hired one of my students when I taught at Harvard. He hired one of my students from there as a law clerk, and I talked to him about that, and he's always been a very friendly, open, collegial guy. People really like him generally.
So did the sexual assault allegations come as a surprise to you? I
was surprised. Although, the question, what did a person do when they were in high school is a much different question from what you would expect them to do when they're an adult professional. So, what kids do in high school when they're drinking, that's hard to say. But I was surprised, that these repeated allegations were coming out. It's not something that having known him, it's not something I expected about him.
And based on your own knowledge of Kavanaugh and his performance at the hearing, do you think he was an acceptable choice for the Supreme Court justice position?
If the allegations were true, obviously that raises serious questions. But assuming that the allegations were not proven as truthful, I think he's as acceptable, if not more acceptable, than just about anyone that's been appointed to the federal courts over the years. He's got a great record. He's known as a very scholarly person.
And what were your thoughts about Kavanaugh's temperament during the hearing? Was that typical of him? What did you think?
I never saw him like that before. That was a very surprise. I was actually very surprised. The one thing I think he probably regrets it and wish he could take it back, was when he implied that there was some revenge going on behalf of the Clintons. But I think he could have been a little more judicious in that setting.
What did you think about how Dr. Blasey Ford conducted herself during the hearing?
She seemed very fine. I think she seemed very believable and sincere, and she didn't really have anything to gain from this. And she had a lot. She suffered a lot personally since this all started happening. So I thought it's unfortunate that people go through that and then don't get believed, and then sort of live with that. The idea that people don't even believe her when she obviously suffered some sort of a traumatic event.
Do you think it's possible for people to believe her and also to believe him?
Well, I'm not an expert in this sort of thing, but, the problem for him was that he so vehemently denied having any involvement with her at all that it's hard to believe both of them, unless one of them is just having a memory lapse. But I could imagine that in a situation like that, people could have different memories and could have had different impressions of the significance of the same event. That wouldn't surprise me if two people were involved in something that one of them experienced as traumatic and the other experienced as nothing that impressive to them. That could happen. But I'm not sure I have no idea whether that's what happened in this particular situation. But given the vehemence of his denials and her insistence that she was 100% sure that it was him, at this point it's hard to believe both of them, although one of them could have had a faulty memory, I suppose.
And many of Kavanaugh's past rulings indicate an opposition to women's reproductive freedoms, immigrants, the Affordable Care Act, and LGBTQ rights. So what does the confirmation of a justice like Kavanaugh mean for the near future of the Supreme Court?
Well, if what you say is accurate in terms of where he turns out, it's going to make a significant difference, because Justice Kennedy, who he's replacing, is the swing vote on those issues. And Justice Kennedy went both ways. He sometimes favored, like for example, he wrote the opinion allowing same-sex marriage, and he was on the side of maintaining Roe versus Wade the last time that it really came to a head at the Supreme Court. So if what you're saying is correct about Justice Kavanaugh, then there'll be a conservative majority that may go the other way on a lot of these important, and hot-button issues.
Do you think that there is a possibility that Roe v. Wade could be overturned?
Oh, sure. I think there is, definitely. There's already a few of the justices, two for sure, that have expressed that view that it ought to be. And I don't think I think it's as likely as almost any precedent to be overturned.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Professor Beermann.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
We have more stories coming up after the break on Good Morning B.U. Don't go away.